Hello guys, it's LeopoldvonCarstein here, and today we'll talk about the Warpning fast Psyker build more in depth. Before I will get to the build, I wanted to share with you some useful tips that maybe you didn't know about. First of all, how to turn off the glowish pink screen at higher warp hits. So you need to go to options, video options, and at the bottom you have the warp heat effects. Turn it off. It helps massively because like 99% of time you will be at maximum warp heat, and having a pinkish screen is not helpful. Some other useful stuff. As you know, at higher warp hits you get some warp anomalies. Most of them are harmful, some of them are beneficial. From the beneficial ones, which one will help you and how it works. So we have the green orb. The green orb basically gives you warp heat decrease. So it can be sometimes helpful, but usually you don't want with this build to grab it. The red orb will heal you. Again, with this build you don't need it, but sometimes it might help you. And the most important one is, as I call it, the purple runed circle. Basically it's like maybe this big of a circle that's purple and has some runes on it. If you run through it or close to it, you get a 20-second buff that gives you plus 50% damage bonus. It's quite useful to know, and if this warp anomaly triggers in your gameplay, then don't forget to use it. So, going inside the character screen and showing how the build works. Basically, for the attributes, you will mainly focus on the force attribute. So you want at least 20 points here. Well, maybe not 20, like the 15 points is minimum. Like the last bonus, the pain channeling, it's not useful for us per se because we don't lose HP. So like 15 is minimum, bare minimum, but you can go as high as you want because it stacks the base damage. With resilience, I have 15 points. It's not really necessary. I mean, you could go like with 0, but with the Aderwalker Psyker I can go lower than 9, so I thought that I can go for the 15 bonus. And with Psy Focus it's worth to go for the full 20 points to get the minus 10 cooldown for psychic powers. Like basically 3 things that are the most, maybe more than 3 things. I will just count them out right now. What things are the most important for this build? First of all, cooldown reduction. You need it as low as possible for this build to make massive damage. Second thing, and it's also a useful tip, you want the critical chance as high as possible. So as I'm aware, the critical chance soft cap is at 50%. After that the hard cap is, I guess, 90. Feel free to correct me, I think it's 90, maybe it's 80, but I'm pretty sure it's 90. Basically you will always hit the 50% mark with this build, and usually in missions we have a crit chance of around 55 to 72 to sometimes 80%. So that's our regular crit chance. Second important thing is the critical hit strength. So basically, how does it work? You have your base damage, and some of the damage in game is added to that, so it's called additive damage. Like most of the damage from the gear that says like you gain X% of bonus damage, like let's say for example here, yeah, plus 10% damage bonus for every active psychic power. It's additive, so if you have like let's say 100% bonus, yeah, it's now 110 for every psychic power. In our case it's 160 if I'm not wrong. But there are two other sources of damage that are multiplicative. The first one is crit. As you can see by the critical hit strength, you want to hit the 150 mark. There are some brackets that you can see on the screen, and which with each level the critical hit is getting stronger, and it's multiplicative. So basically at 150 critical hit strength, if your base damage is let's say 100, you deal 400 damage. So that's one of the most important things to have in mind when you're doing the higher difficulties, because it helps you massively. So right now we have 71. Previously I had 81, and the rest I was getting from the Inoculator, which I'll show you later. The second main source of multiplicative damage is vulnerabilities. They are also right now multiplicative. So, getting back to the build. For perks, I use Anointment, which gives me, if I'm correct, 60 or 70% bonus. 10% for each active psychic power buff. I use the Diversive Tactics, which is getting pretty standard and a meta right now. How it basically works is that it increases the resistance of the enemy by 5% with each hit that I make, but also gives vulnerabilities to all other sources. And how it works right now is that I have, as Psykers, different sources of the damage. I have my Fire AoE aura that burns enemies and deals heat damage. I have my basic attacks from the rod and the sword that deal physical damage, and I have my main damage spenders that deal warp damage. So it's important to cycle those skills that the warp vulnerability is always on the top. And I also have Psychic Boon, which massively helps in the gameplay. I mean, it doesn't give you any damage bonuses, but not having to cycle with the buffs every 30 to 50 minutes seconds is really helpful. As to the passives, from Psyker debuffs, we want the Armor Piercing 1, which will reduce enemy armor, and it's really helpful in the Endgame content. And we have the stun 1, which stuns enemies, which works with other skills that I will talk about later. From psychic combat, what we want are those 3. We want the damage boost to boost our damage. We want the speed boost to make us move faster. And the third one is not important, but we have to take it to get those 2. Then we want to get the movement skill tree, pretty standard, just to get those cooldowns as low as we can. Next, critical hits, to boost our crit strength, to boost our crit chance, to boost our damage. Next, I would go for probably debuffs, as it boosts our damage from stacking all the debuffs or the vulnerabilities or the bleeds on our enemies. The defense tree, I will talk about it a bit later. After the debuffs, area effects, the most important skills here are the increased range of cone skills and path skills, which we use, the cooldown reductions, a 20% area damage bonus, and some other damage bonuses from other sources. So that's the core. The more points you have, the more distribution you can make, and basically, as with this build, we're quite immortal right now due to some Psyker abilities. We just want to purely focus on 2 things. To getting our dodge chance as high as possible. We can just ignore the reductions. They are not useful to us right now. And we want to focus on damage. So basically what I done, I focus on my dodge in the defense tree. First of all, 20% of damage reduction is added to dodge. It's not much, but you know, every point counts. And, which is quite good, 100% dodge from 4 swords. It gave me, if I remember correctly, 7 dodge. So every point counts, really. I started like at 13 maybe, now it's 29 with all the gear, all the bonuses. I get, I don't know what is the hard cap for dodge, but on paper I would get like 90% of range dodge and about 50 to 60% of melee dodge. So it's really helpful. After the defense tree, we are getting the damage over time tree. Basically, like the plus 10% dot damage, it's okay, but right now, from my knowledge, the dots are pretty much in a ish, not really worth state. Let's say it like that. That's a good perk for us, because like from our AoE spell, all the enemies will bleed, so at the same time they will get slowed. But the most important thing here is the toxic synergy, which gives 15% damage bonus for every active dot effect on the target, and usually we will get like 3 of those, 4 of those, something like that. So it's a pretty good damage increase. From other skill trees, I took the support tree just to give a little boost to my inoculator so that I can use it one more time. Usually I don't need it, but better safe than sorry. And a bit more cooldown reduction never hurts. Then my newest experimentation is the hit tree. So I boost only one skill, but what I wanted that my critical hits burn the enemy and add even more hit vulnerability. Why? Burning the enemies means one more active dot effect all the time on enemies. And hit vulnerability means that I gain more damage in other types of damage, so with physical and warp. And as we know, warp is our main damage source. As to the Puritan path and Radical path, to be honest, we don't really need perks from anything from here. I mean, I have like this perk active because it gives me plus 2% damage bonus, but to be honest, I don't need it really. As to the gear, Radical has more offensive gear, Puritan has more defensive gear. Right now, we don't need any of those. In the future, if one of the skills that I will talk about in a second will probably get nerfed to some degree, in my opinion, the Puritan path will be the better choice. So, quick recap of the skill trees. Now to the, let's say, Inoculator, yeah. So, as I said at the beginning, there are two basically sources of multiplicative damage: the vulnerability and the critical hits. So, the easiest way to get our crit and crit strength boosted is using the yellow murder lust component. Each one gives us 5% critical hit chance and 20% critical hit strength for 20 seconds on use, which means that combined I get 15% more critical chance, which gets me at the cap, and 60% critical hit strength, which gets me to 130 right now. Previously it was 150, but I said okay, I prefer much more to stack two more vulnerability sound codes than have a statistically a 20% higher chance to deal 50% more multiplicative damage instead of just doing 100% more multiplicative vulnerability damage. And I use the cooldown reduction. To be honest, I don't know why I had it. It should be this one. Yeah, it should be this one. So yeah, I have 7 uses of my Inoculator, and now going to psychic powers. So basically we have 2 sets of weapons. We start our missions with a staff, and this is basically our boost phase. All of our skills here boost our character. So first of all, this one is like a panic button skill, let's say. So if somehow you'll get killed, it prevents it. It also, as you see with the runes, increases power effectiveness, adds damage bonus, adds movement speed. Next one, and it's quite an important skill, so you can use it from like the beginning of the game. Increases our dodge chance against ranged attacks. So it says 25%, but if we look at the rune, it actually gives us 40%. So it's 40%. That's why I said it's without any caps. I would have like 90% dodge. I think that the hard cap is 80, but maybe it's 60. Hard to tell. And we want also the increased power duration. Like, we didn't have it here because it has no duration, but every other skill has the duration. Normally it's 30 seconds. With that it's 45 plus from our passive it makes 90 seconds, so 1.5 minutes. Usually it's enough to just clear any mission at almost any difficulty. The next buff that is a game changer is Misfortune. So I would rank it as the second or third best buff for the Psyker class. Basically it changes the armor type, so heavily armored enemies get armored, armored enemies are unarmored. It helps a lot with our damage because only one of our skills, the main spender that's usually reserved for bosses, is armor piercing, so we don't care about the armor. And again, increased power duration, bonus damage, bonus movement speed. Next one, warp speed. It also helps a lot. It would be probably my number 2 spot on the list of buffs. It gives us the 25% damage bonus, but it also, with the rune, gives us actually 35% damage bonus and 35% cooldown reduction to weapon attacks, which helps a lot. As you'll later see, I will show you the cooldowns. Next one, Divine Shot, pretty standard, used also for the Witchfire build. Every first hit deals 100% more damage. So it's usually not really a must-have skill to per se on higher difficulties, but usually on lower difficulties you can just one-shot most of the enemies, so it helps you with the clear times of your runs. So it's also a really good choice, probably my number 4 spot. Here we use increased power duration, of course, movement speed, damage bonus. So that's our buffing stage. We also use staff You don't have to get a holy staff with explosion or anything else like this. I mean, it's helpful. I like the explosion staff because, as you can see here, that's the main important thing. You get 50% decrease to cooldown of your skills on kill, plus you have a small chance to just reset them on kill. If I explode some enemies, additionally, the cooldowns go away almost instantly, so I can just switch to the stuff really fast, focus on some trash mobs, kill them in like a second or two, rebuff myself in like 2 seconds, switch to my main gear and start the annihilation again. That's our second weapon set. That's our main damage weapon set, and basically how it works. We need any rod at all, doesn't really matter which one. I prefer the telekinetic rod because this build is basically in your face type. And we need Ether Blade for the teleportation skill. So those are the two weapons that we will use. As for the powers, we use Hemorrhage for a massive area of effect with stun, with hallucination, with bleed, so again a lot of debuffs, a lot of dots, a lot of increased damage. And also in our build, if we stun enemies, they explode on kill. So also it's basically 99.9% of time we'll just kill enemies by using this skill. We would not have to use our second skill. That's basically a boss killer, as I say. So as for runes, we use Enlarged Area, which increases the area of effect, obviously useful. We use the Reduced Power cooldown, so as you see we have a 1.5 per second cooldown. I think that the basic one is like 4, something like that, 4 or even 5. We use the stun effect, which is important because if we stun an enemy and kill it, he will explode. Our main damage dealer for the bigger enemies is Biolightning. As you can see here, for runes we use increased power effectiveness. So as you can see, the damage increase is pretty significant. We use armor piercing, which is important because it ignores armor, and sometimes on higher difficulties the bosses usually have armor or heavy armor, so it's better to have that than not to have it. And we also have a dot. So we have a warp dot. We have a bleed dot. We have a warp bleed dot. Then we have a fire bleed dot, thanks to our passive skill tree. So that's 3 different dots that increase our damage by 45% from the passive skill trees. As to the fiery form, it helps us mostly by giving the bonus 15%, the bonus 24% damage. But what is most important It's also blessing, so it gives us 10% from our perk, and as it burns enemies, it gives us hit vulnerability. All of that basically means that with our build and our perks, most of the time the enemies are more resilient to the hit vulnerability that we don't care about that much, and this way we can hit really hard with the warp. It's a constant aura, so you have to activate it every like 25 or 30 seconds with this build, but it constantly burns enemies. And coming back to the #1 spot on my list of the buffs, I mean, if I would make a list of the buffs, this one would get like the first spot, the second spot, the third spot, and the next buff would be like at the 11th spot. It's so powerful. Precognition, I mean, it's just insane. At first, I didn't use it. I thought, wow, it's actually not that good. It lasts for 60 seconds. Each time an enemy hits you, it reduces its time for 5 seconds, and it generates a massive amount of warp hit. But first of all, what can we do to make it shine, to make it really powerful? We can obviously increase the power duration. So with this and the perk that gives 100% duration, it's actually not 60 seconds, it's 180 seconds combined. Wow, that's a massive difference. Okay, but what about the warp hit? What about the warp hit? We don't care about the warp hit, because even if we get a bad anomaly, and even that anomaly hits us, we don't care because we get 100% damage reduction. So basically, in the worst case scenario, an anomaly hits us and it takes out 5 seconds of the precognition skill. Wow. That's, I mean, like, if there's one skill in the Psyker class that should be nerfed, and I'm wondering how the hell it happened that it reduces the damage by 100%, then that's the skill that will probably get nerfed. I mean, logically speaking, it should give us like 80% damage reduction. That would be fair, that would be a good skill that we would use, but it wouldn't be insane. So, back to the topic. We get 100% duration, we get increased time of the precognition skill from 60 seconds to 180 seconds. We absolutely don't care about the warp hit generated because we like warp hit. The more warp hit we get, the more damage we make. We use damage bonus to the power, and now what you can do. I mean, I don't use it because I don't need it, but if your dodge chance is lower, instead of getting, for example, the 10% movement speed or 10% damage power, you could go for this one. It changes the cost of getting hit from 5 to 3. Basically what that means on paper of course, that instead of being able to take 30 hits, you can take 50 hits. So it's a massive increase. And now you know why I'm stacking the dodge chance. If I have from 50 to 80% dodge chance on each of the enemy attacks, they are not triggering my precognition, meaning I have it all the time. I'm just immortal. I could do like difficulty plus, I don't know, 100 if it would be possible, and the enemies could hit me for, I don't know, 50 million, 100 million, whatever. With 100% damage reduction, I don't care about it. So basically, I could have 0 damage reduction, 0 physical resist, 0 hit resist, 0 warp resist. I couldn't care less about those skills. I can just purely focus with this build on the damage. At the end of the video guide, however, I will give you some pointers and some tips what to do if this skill will get nerfed, and as I said, I think, and it's an obvious choice, to just nerf it in the future. So have it in mind. Okay, going back to the items. I will show you how the build works. So, neural implant with enrage token on critical hit. Obviously, it stacks enrage. For each enrage token, we get 3% damage bonus. So we can have 10 enrage tokens total max. We usually have the max amount of tokens, so 30% damage increase just by using this one. Then we stack dodge chance, because there's nothing better on the neural implant. We don't need the damage resists. We go for the psi focus because whatever we can, we don't have anything else worthwhile. We go for the dot duration because whatever. And the damage bonus against bleeding enemies. Like, most of the enemies will bleed all the time, so it's worthwhile to have. It just increases our damage all the time. For the eye implant, so I'll just quickly get the second one. Well, I have the 90 level on another character, but you will get the idea. For the eye implant, right now I use the damage bonus per enrage token, so 10 enrage tokens, 57% more damage. We go for critical strength, damage for bio-lightning power. It's our main damage dealer against bosses. Critical hit chance, again more damage against bleeding enemies. And that's quite important, inoculator effect duration. As you could see, it's 20% by default, but with all the increases, right now it's about 37 to 40%. So I almost doubled the duration of the inoculator effect. Next one, main implant, same story, 57% more damage. Psi focus, damage bonus for bio-lightning, bonus for force, bonus for area effect skills. As for the sound code doctrine, plus 50% warp damage bonus. Right now we could also go for just 3 of those, so we'll get 150% of effectiveness of vulnerability debuffs, but probably same as with Precognition, it will get sorted out, so it will be just additive instead of multiplicative. It makes sense, or the sound code will just get nerfed to like 20% or something like that. Next, Purity Seal, chance to gain enraged tokens all kill. Right now we don't really need it, but there is nothing else that I really need it, so I just use it, and it has 5 slots. So here, damage reduction, because I couldn't get anything else really useful. More dodge chance against range attacks. I mean, I could go for like melee attacks instead of ranged attacks, but whatever. What's important here is the cooldown reduction. We want to get this. Like dodge, cooldown reduction. Those are the 2 most important skills here. And damage bonus against champion enemies. It's always helpful. Next, right now I use the critical chance per enraged token. Previously I had like the one that gives 50% chance to burn on critical hit, but as we are burning enemies on critical hits due to our passive hit tree. We don't need it, so I'm just stacking even more critical hit chance. And again, Biomancy Psychic powers damage bonus to vulnerability debuffs, effectiveness, and increased inoculator effect duration. As to my armor, right now I'm using this one as it gives vulnerability on hit. Basically it means that I can get to the max stack of vulnerabilities even faster this way. Also, it gives cooldown reduction, which we couldn't get normally on an armor. It gives us +1 second to vulnerability duration, which we couldn't get on an armor the normal way. And it also increases the effectiveness of vulnerability, plus critical damage, which is also nice. And here, like the mandatory sound code doctrine is the 50% warp damage bonus, and the warp resistance of enemies is halved, which is really good. If the Precognition will get nerfed, like I said, and for example it won't stop 100% of damage, but it will stop, let's say, 70 or 80%, I mean 80% would be the logical choice, or maybe 90, but not 100. If that would happen, I would probably get more damage reductions and resists, obviously. So probably here I would just go throw the Psi Focus away, switch one of the secondary slots for primary and go for the damage resists. And I would change the armor to this beauty, the Holy Warbound armor, which increases our dodge chance, as you can see, but also gives 10% chance to blind enemies on dodge. So with this one, that's kind of yeah, so as you can see, it's a level 61 item, so I'm getting less bonuses from it than I would normally. But with this one, you have like 49% of dodge already, plus the 40% from the Biomancy power, plus from the gear. I mean, you're basically dodging like most of the attacks, and you have 10% chance to dodge to blind enemies. Let me see really fast if I can find it. The blind. Yeah, basically the blind gives was it like minus 40%? Like minus 40% chance to hit an enemy and some other massive debuffs. So on top of your dodge, the enemy has also like minus 40% chance to hit, so it won't hit you as much as it would normally, so it's even better. But right now we don't need to use it. Like, I prefer this one still for now. If you cannot get this one or this one, that one is the way to go at higher difficulties. You can get it to up plus 15, stacks 5 times. And basically what you do, and what you can see me doing in my videos, because I was doing it so long that it just muscle memory. You are using either strike or kinetic shockwave to get those 5 stacks. Right now we can see it's like 0.5 second, but in game it's with the buffs it's like 0.3. So I get like 3 attacks per second. So in 1.5 seconds I can get to 5 stacks. And then I release the Bio Lightning with the increased damage. And then again, 5 stacks, boom, Bio Lightning. 5 stacks, boom, Bio Lightning. Then, back to the gear. Inoculator. I use for now the when in an enraged state enemies within 5 meters are feared, because it drops the suppression faster. It's helpful. Normally I would use something like in protected state we get focused state, so we get higher regeneration, but we are not getting damage, so we don't need regeneration. So I choose the +4 to force, +4 to resilience, +6 inoculator capacity. That's the important part. You want to get max capacity from the inoculator here, +6, so we can get that 1 extra usage and the increased duration, and again Soundcode Doctrine of 50% warp damage bonus. As to the weapons, pretty standard enchants. Critical hit strength, damage bonus for Biomancy, damage bonus for Bio Lightning, damage bonus for bleeding. Same here. Critical strength, damage bonus Bio Lightning, Biomancy, crit chance, bleeding. So it's pretty much standard. With 5 slots, that's your standard template. As to the relic enchants, like this enchant, it's like the second most absurd thing on the Psyker and in the game in general. How it works is that every 10th enemy explodes on kill. The radius of the explosion is not as good as the one on this explosion or this explosion. Like this one is massive. But how it works? After you have like different types of explosions. You have the explosion like here. The stunned enemies explode on kill and deal up to 500 extra damage of the killing blow's damage. What it means, the killing blow is not the damage, the whole damage that you do to the enemy when it dies. It's just the portion of the damage from the remaining health bar to 0 HP for the mob. So for example, if on paper I'm doing 1000 damage and the mob, let's say, has 100 HP, the explosion won't hit for 5000, so for my whole damage that I did to the enemy, it hits for the killing blow damage, which means the HP that currently the monster has. So if it has 100 HP, it will deal only 500 damage. So it's not as good as you would think it is, but the area of the explosion is so big that it can stack. One explosion can kill another enemy, and it stacks and stacks and stacks. And if you get a big boss near a group of like, let's say 15 or 20 mobs, and each of those mobs explode for like, I don't know, like let's say 500 to 1000, it stacks together, and you know, hitting a boss for 20,000, it's quite good, yeah. How this one works and why this one is much better at higher difficulties. I mean, for me, it's OP. It should be 50% of HP max. How it works? Every 10th enemy explodes on kill and deals damage equal to 100% of their HP, but it doesn't get into account the mission difficulty. If it would be okay, but right now if you go to let's say -99 mission difficulty, in which I do like let's say 5 to 10k damage tops with this absurd build, and usually I hit for like I don't know 1000, let's say, yeah. If you kill a mob that has like trash mob that has like 2000 3000 HP, it explodes for 3000 damage. If you hit like an elite that has like let's say 40,000 HP, it hits everything around for 40,000 damage. It's just insane amount of damage. So right now I'm testing this Holy Ether Blade, which deals less damage than the stun variant, but shocks also. And I'm trying to just compare them, which one will be better, so I don't have a definitive opinion right now which one is better. Probably this one, but I'm trying to test it a bit more. Like on paper right now I would say go for this one, it's easier to get and it's better, but I want to try this. There's also this one. It is situational. I mean, like the 300% maximum damage is looking pretty sweet. But let's be honest, how many times you'll get like 30 enemies in 10-meter radius and they will survive more than 1 second. So I don't like situational stuff. I like stuff that works most of the time. That's why I don't use it right now, but probably later I will test it also. Maybe my opinion will change. As to the eye implant slot, there's also one really good item that I use and I compare it. Don't mind the stats because it's only level 76, on 90 it's higher. But basically it gives us critical damage, critical strength, critical hit chance, HP is not worth for us, and critical damage. And what's important here, basically normally you cannot get those two together. Either you get the crit chance or you get the crit damage. Here you can have 60% critical damage, 10% critical strength, and 5.6 at level 90 critical hit chance. So it's really good. Okay guys, so that's the full guide. If you have any questions, feel free to ask on my channel, and of course don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers.